Thanks very much for that. So yeah, there's four really groups within the SWP program. It is a 7-year program. It is reconfirmed every year, and we're in about nearly 3.5 years in now. The levy covers about 20 to 25% of the program, so there's a big chunk from the ministry. There's a levy and there's industry dollars directly on top of the levy, and there's also Scion Align funding in this program. So that's how it sits. I'm going to talk I've just got a few examples on each of these. I'm not going to go through our whole program. Obviously there's only 15 minutes, so that won't be happening. I'm going to try and show some of the new products we're working on. So Bruce will be happy to actually see some going past the log stage. The first one is Douglas fir. We've done some cross-laminated timber testing. So that's basically getting your you've got boards along the bottom and then orientated 90 degrees, another row of boards, and then the same again on top. Now you're probably aware that the XLAM company in Nelson is making this product commercially out of radiata. They put together these panels for us out of Douglas fir. And we've been testing those at the University of Canterbury. And we found our results so far basically suggesting that we've got comparable strength to the radiata panels that have been produced, and also in terms of a range of connections that we've made here, they're performing basically just as good as the radiata and showing very good seismic resilience. So excellent product for earthquake building design. Why are we doing this work? 2 reasons. One is, can we find a new product for Douglas fir? What else can we make out of the Douglas fir? And that's both thinnings and mature age. So those are the key reasons why we're working on Douglas fir, and because there's an existing resource of Douglas fir, if we've got a new product, we can start making it now. We don't have to plant a species and wait for a new product. So that's why we're working on the CLT there. For the naturally durable eucalypts, and that's really Paul Mellons here. He's basically representing the New Zealand Dryland Forest Initiative. That's really what the natural durable eucalypts are about. I've got 4 brief areas here. Talk about heartwood screening tool, durability, and the key thing here really is you have to grow heartwood if you want durable wood, and we have to be able to measure that cheaply so we can screen a whole heap of trees. So that's why we're working on that. Durability, obviously, we know these trees when they were very popular in Australia, obviously when they were old growth, they were very well used for highly durable products. We're trying to grow them on a much shorter rotation, so we need to have some evidence that growing them on a different site and on a shorter rotation will give us the durability we're after. Forest health, we've talked a little bit about that, but I've got a couple of examples there, and the site species mapping as well. We're not blessed with these species as we are with radiata, where we can just about blanket plant that anywhere and it'll survive. The species within my program are like a bit more care. So this is the measuring probe. Basically, you drill 2 holes, and then you put a probe in the bottom hole, and then you incrementally push this top probe in, and as you're going, it's measuring the resistance, electrical resistance between the 2 probes. So the resistance is quite low in the sapwood, and as you get to the heartwood boundary, the resistance goes up. So you know, basically, without having to chop the tree down, how much sapwood and heartwood you've got within that tree. And there's just some data showing, you can see the brown curve there basically showing the current gradient, and you can see their estimated sapwood depth is about 5.5 centimetres. And that way we can screen a whole heap of trees and actually make sure that we're breeding for trees that develop early heartwood. The second part of the heartwood, you want a lot of it and you want it to be early, but you also want it to be durable. So we're measuring the level of extractives within the heartwood. So there's a couple of curves here for 2 different species. We're using NIR here to correlate between the measured and predicted extractive content. And you see we've got a very good relationship there. done across 2 species and a range of sites. The next relationship's not as tight, it's not as nice as we'd like to see it, but this is taking it from the extractive content to the amount of mass loss. So that's basically putting them in fungal cellars and seeing how fast they rot away. And you want them to have low mass loss. So you can see here the trees in the bottom right hand side, these are predicted to have high extractive content and they're showing a low mass loss. So those are the trees we want to select in our program. And we've found that this NIR is capable of selecting these durable trees. There is some false positives, of course, so you're losing some good trees, but basically when you do select for the high predictive extractive content, you are getting those trees that do have lower mass loss. 2 different types of rot here. You can see white rot and brown rot, similar results. There is some indication of influence of site. And you can see on here, basically the purple dots, they're all pretty low in terms of mass loss, whereas the red dots, which are from a different site, you can see that the lower level of extractive content had definitely higher mass loss. So we need to understand this more and understand if we're going to make some sort of durability ratings that they hold across different sites that you might plant the trees on. Forest health, so this is still in the durable eucalypt space. We definitely found significant differences in susceptibility and tolerance to 3 key pest diseases. So that's within species we're finding. Some of them are much less palatable than others, which is excellent. Obviously, we need that variation to be able to breed for that. In terms of comparing some of our Basistoana families to a Globoidea control, which is much less susceptible to attack, we found that 5 of the 15 families of the Basistoana actually performed as well or better than our control. So that shows us, A, we've got the variation, but B, actually the better performing trees, better performing families, I should say, are just as tolerant to pest attack as a species that we would say on the whole was pretty good. So that's really encouraging for us, and that's a big push as part of the breeding program. And we've implemented a biosecurity plan. That's just to make sure that when you're visiting sites, you're not carrying bugs from a previous site. If you want to send samples, say from a trial down to the University of Canterbury, you're making sure you're going through all the decontamination, checking, making sure you're not giving bugs a free ride and giving them a holiday in the South Island. So that was quite important for the program as well. The site species matching, this is University of Canterbury again. They did build some yield and survival models for Basistoana and Globoidea, and they found some of the key factors really within the sites were the wind exposure and topographic protection index. So that's made up of what's the altitude of that particular tree within the site? Is it above or below the average? Is it in a localised hollow or a rise? So what's the exposure to sunlight and those sort of other factors, as well as wind. So those were the 2 most important predictors for both species. And we've seen that this microsite variation can be quite critical for the eucalypts. You know, you can be on one site and part of it, the trees are growing fantastically, and other sites the trees are bordering on struggling to survive. So it's critical that we understand what factors drive the success of these species. And we also found Basistoana is relatively sensitive to soil moisture compared to Globoidea. The non-durable eucalypts, we've been working with mainly Knightons and Fastigata in this area. Why are we working on the Knightons? Basically, one of our shareholders, Southwood Exports, has got 10,000 hectares of Knightons down the bottom of the South Island. Currently just being sold for chip. We're keen to find some products that we can add value to that. So can we make some solid wood product? So we've done a couple of things here. One was, can we measure the logs in some way and predict the dry and degrade so that we can saw up the ones which we know will be stable on drying? And we've also done some thermal modifications of Knightons to see if that will add durability and stability. So the results this is on the drying. We found that air dry boards have less degrade than kiln dried, so if you take it slow, you actually get less degrade, which is logical and good to validate that. We also found that thinner boards tend to dry better. This was not significant, but the trend was there that the thinner boards tend to have less degrade than the thicker boards. Again, suggesting something like peeling or sawing thin product will be better in terms of what sort of products you might want to produce. Unfortunately, we haven't been successful with our measuring a log and then predicting the level of degrade. So you can see the bad logs. So these are ones were predicted to be bad from log measurements on the left, and then the ones on the right were predicted to be good. So that's basically should have been the top 5 to 10% on this side and the bottom 5 to 10% on that side. So they should have been quite extreme if our segregation worked. And we found that the parameters we used weren't good predictors of propensity to check and collapse. So you can see, you know, in this good log, there's really one bad one, 84, which sort of chucked out the average on the good logs. But you can also see in this figure the reason why we're doing it. You can see here, log 51, even though that was predicted to be bad, it still had no degrade. So we know there's logs in there that will give us low levels of degrade regardless of how we dry them. We just haven't been able to find the right technology to identify them yet. But this is what encourages us to keep trying, because we know some logs, doesn't matter, you can kiln dry them, race them all the way through there, and there won't be any dry and degrade. But we don't know which ones they are before we start, so that's why we're trying to find them. Thermal modification, that's basically cooking the timber at high temperatures with no oxygen, obviously, otherwise it'll just be firewood. We found we did get a slight increase in durability with high temperature, but the results weren't that high. The pressure steam modification did reduce degrade, so that was, but we needed to confirm the level. And the temperatures also changed the colour. So if you're a fan of darker timber, this is a process that can actually give you a darker product. For the cypresses, and we haven't got a lot of results on cypress, but we did do some thermal modification. Positive responses here. We found that both the sapwood and the heartwood had higher levels of durability after treatment. Again, you've got the colour change, and again, you've got the increase in dimensional stability. The timber, after it's been thermally modified, doesn't like taking up and losing moisture really after the treatment, so that's why they're more stable. And a couple of other things we're doing on cypress. Scion ran a siting survey really to understand what the important factors were for siting cypresses, and I suppose no surprises, moderate to well sheltered, it likes the good soils, it likes the best sites, can't be too dry. We did find down south that the south facing slopes tend to be a bit better, but the other question that Scion asked in this survey was really, are you keen to put some trials on your land? And that comes into our last slide here. Scion and Proseed are preparing some planting stock of Macrocarpa, which has been selected to be have a high tolerance to canker. So we really want to get that out on a range of sites and understand if we've got some good tolerance to that disease, which is the main drawback for the Macrocarpa. We will be doing some wood properties on cypress this year, and there's a sawing study planned on some young, unpruned 20-year-old cypress to see if a regime like that can actually deliver some economics. And a cypress calculator will also be evaluated this year to see what sort of gaps there are there. So that's a super speedy snapshot of the program of where we're up to. Our research providers are Scion, University of Canterbury and Marlborough Research Centre, so that these are their results I've been presenting today. So got any questions, give me a yell. Thank you.